but I will introduce, in the order I can see them on my Zoom, the guests that we have with us this evening. And I'll start with Writers Guild award-winning writer, Sophie Petzl. She won her award for Blood, which is now had its second series on Channel 5, but she's also written for Last Kingdom and Riviera. Next to her on my screen, Simon Beaufoy, Oscar-winning writer, of course, of Slumdog Millionaire, The Full Monty, and as I discovered today as I was doing my research, The Hunger Games. I did not know that. That was new information to me. But in television, he's worked on the stunning show Trust, and he's currently working on The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. And last, but by absolutely no means least, Emilia Di Girolamo. Is that right? We got that right?
It's close. Di Girolamo.
I was miles out. Di Girolamo, which you will have seen that name on television a lot. She wrote The Poison Tree. She was the showrunner at Law and Order UK, and she wrote on The Tunnel for Sky. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. We sent you our guidelines, which are now going live on the WGGB website, and you've had a chance to read them and think about them. And I'm going to open with a question. I'll go from Sophie to Simon to Emilia. What is your understanding of a writer's room in the UK? Sophie, do you want to start on that?
I mean, so my understanding of it is that in principle, it's trying to achieve the same thing that we understand the term to mean in the US. We get a group of writers together to break episodes of a show, and presumably each of those writers in the room will then contribute an episode of the show. In reality, I've found it to mean many different things in practice. It can, like, I've sort of done the more like true to form American system where you're in every day, 5 days a week, 10 to 6, if not more, and you're breaking every living beat of every episode down to its minute detail, so that the idea being that when you go to outline or script, it's basically all there anyway, and you're just filling in blanks. It never works out that way, but that's the principle behind the idea. And I've also been in writers' rooms where you're really just chewing sort of broad strokes fat, and then the head writer goes away and breaks them down into sort of more detailed outlines. And I've been in rooms that are like 2 days, we need to break all 6 in 2 days, and that we're doing it in much more broad strokes, and they just look like the kind of story conferences we used to have before we relabeled them writers' rooms. So I find that in the UK it can mean sort of a variety of things, but it's a collection of writers, you know, it's a sort of a head writer or a showrunner, a bunch of other writers breaking a series together.
And Simon, was that does that reflect your experience on Trust?
Yes, I was really lucky to have a long period of gestation. I mean, I guess I see it, there's so much craft in building a series, almost more so than writing a movie. And it felt to me very much like you're building a house, not quite from scratch, but almost from scratch. And you're getting a lot of craftspeople in to try and help you work out precisely what this house is going to look like. How many rooms? Basically, you might know how many episodes you've got, but you might not, even at that early stages. We didn't. And you try and gather this group of craftspeople around you to build from the ground up. That's the way I find it most productive, because you're, rather than getting people in for a couple of days, we got people in for 6 weeks on Trust to really break things down, really work out what we were saying and what I thought we were going to do at the beginning of the show, the beginning of the story meetings. 6 weeks later, it was very clear that that show I thought would have been great wouldn't work at all. So I needed all those writers to help shape it and change it and sort of organically work out how many rooms this house look. Is it a timber framed house? Is it a modern house? You know, there are so many different things that I was helped with as the showrunner by having a long period with writers to help grow it. And for me, that was the most valuable part, and why every writer should be paid for every minute they are in a room at the beginning of a process. Because for me, that's where the real heavy lifting happens. That's where you're really being told and discovering what the show really is. Not what you thought it was when you pitched it, but what you know, when you're going to go away and write this, what are you really writing? And that happens in the period with all those writers in a room working incredibly hard. So I'm really pleased that the guidelines state that when you're in that room working as a writer, as if you're a craftsperson, because that's what we all are, you get paid for your craft.
Emilia, has that been your experience? Have you enjoyed your time in writers' rooms?
I have. I mean, I've got less experience of being in a room as a writer, probably certainly than Sophie. And I don't know about you, Simon. I've only sort of worked on one show where I was really in a room, and I was really privileged to sort of have Chris Chibnall as showrunner on Law and Order on my first kind of year there. And he was just the most incredibly generous showrunner and someone that it was amazing to learn from. So I'm not sure my experience was really that similar to lots of experiences I've heard, which haven't been quite so pleasant. But in terms of the rooms that I've run, so on later on Law and Order and on The Tunnel, I haven't had the benefit of so many weeks, which would have been lovely. I think it's quite hard in the UK to get that length of time. I would love to have a room for 6 weeks. The rooms I've run have been a lot shorter, but as Simon said, just incredible processes of work. I've found the writers that I've worked with really inspiring, and they've been just a huge part of building those shows. And I think I think we should fight for longer rooms and for those writers to be paid for every second they're in that room, definitely.
What we like to hear. I'm getting a sense that my next question was going to be whether you welcomed the rise of the writers' room in the UK, but I think that you sort of answered that. So the question I would ask is, would you like to see us move a little closer to the American series? The Guild ran a session sort of this time last year where we got the American guru of showrunners to tell us what that meant, and that meant a heck of a lot of work for the showrunner. Is that something that frightens you, Emilia?
No, not really. I mean, I've got a show in production, amazingly, despite COVID at the moment, and I'm doing sort of all of the duties that I would do as a showrunner on that as an exec. But because it's only a 4-parter and I've written the whole series, I haven't had a writer's room on that. It's just been me. But it's, that's part of the process that I love. The room is an amazing part, but there's so much more to it than that. There's all of the kind of exec duties, working with the designers, today I listened to composers, trying to work out who's going to be a composer. I looked at costumes, I looked at, there's a million things that happen in one day, and I love being a part of the whole of that and holding, because you have this vision in your head of what the show is going to be, and then you bring on all these people that you're going to collaborate with, and that for me is a really exciting part. It is a lot of work. But I love that, and I think it's brilliant for writers and creators to be able to have that level of control over their work.
Sophie, is it all about the control for you?
Weird. No. I always hear the sort of American writers on podcasts and interviews and people I've met sort of talking about the kind of the impossibility of the showrunner job in the US, and I can only speak to that reportage. Like I don't know exactly. I don't know if it's very similar to our writer exec producer role, or I get the impression that they're much more like the exec producer from the company, but also the head writer. So they're not only just meaningfully consulting on design and costume and casting, but they're also having to write the budget, and they're also getting the bank loans, and that I have no interest really in doing that. And that's why I'll always have sort of a producing or exec producing partner, or somebody who's from the company who's managing all that stuff. All I really want to be involved in is the creative stuff. I basically want to be the head of the script department. So if that's the model that people wanted to introduce, great. I don't know that I'd be jumping up. I mean, I already, and I imagine you'll go into this, but I already balk when people joyfully sort of proclaim me a showrunner, because I'm like, I don't think you know what that means, and I don't think I know what you mean by that. I think you just think that makes me Emmy potential rather than it's like, oh, if we call you a showrunner, it's going to look American and it's going to be on HBO instead of ITV3, and it's just a bit, yeah. So I don't know. I'm sort of going off piece now, but yeah, the writer, exec, producer kind of title, contractual note, whatever it is allows me to be as in control and as in charge of creative stuff as I sort of want to be, and it also means that I'm responsible and accountable for that side of things, and I feel like my role there is very clear, and where it ends is also very clear. I think what you get with the showrunner idea is a bit more ambiguity, and you know, if one day I had to take on all that responsibility, I still think I think this is too much for one person for me to be applying for bank loans and tax credits whilst also casting, whilst also writing. But there will be people who are far more ambitious and far more talented than I am who'll be jumping at that bit, I imagine.
Simon, is there a point where you draw the line and go, this is not my area of expertise, and can we get someone else to do that?
Yeah, I'm very lucky in that I've been running around calling myself a showrunner for years, and it turns out from your guidelines I'm just a lead writer, and that's actually the bit I really enjoy. And I'm a lead writer with a little bit more because I was there with during casting and a lot of the creative decisions, but really luckily didn't have to deal with budgets, had a lot of the deal making that a US showrunner would have to get involved with. I didn't have to deal with any of that. And actually, what I'm really good at is writing. And I'm not really good at the other stuff. I'd love to pretend I am so I can call myself a showrunner, which sadly you've now told me I'm not. So I've demoted myself thanks to your guidelines. But that's where I'm really comfortable. And for me, that's precisely where I want to be with my career. It is being in charge of all of the writing, and that includes being in an edit room at the end where you're effectively writing just with the pictures. And honestly, I'd love to have lots of other talented people do all the other bits for me. I just really want to write. So amazing that people can do more than that. I can't. I can just write. And so I'm happy to be, from now on, not a showrunner but a lead writer.
I think that's a very healthy way to look at it. Emilia, is there a way to assert yourself, or do you sometimes find that your plate's getting piled high? Because the thing that sort of, I'm doing my first exec producer job, and occasionally I do feel like going, I'm really not qualified to do that. But it's a very nerve-wracking thing to do. What would be your advice to someone feeling their plate's being piled a little higher than it should be?
I think you have to delegate, and you have to have really good people around you that can take on that work when you can't. But it is hard once the juggernaut's running and you're in the middle of a show and there are decisions to be made. If you are that writer that wants to be, or that showrunner that wants to be an executive producer and be over all of that, you have to be a part of those decisions. But it's really dependent on what production company you're working with, I think, as to how much of that you're given and how much of that you take and how much of that you don't. And I think most producers would be open to you saying, do you know what, I really don't want to do any of that, but I want to do some of this. And so on the show I'm doing at the moment, I really, really wanted to be across like all the music, for example, not just the scoring, but like music that's used in it. So I've worked really closely with the music supervisor right from the beginning. I have looked at all the costumes, and some of them I've given back notes. Some of them I've just been sort of, no, leave that totally to our brilliant costume designer. She probably knows a lot more about it than me. But it's sort of, there are, I have kind of on this particular show, but not so much on others, been involved in some of the kind of financial decisions and things to do with budget, but I haven't been sort of doing the budget myself particularly. And again, I've just got no interest in figures really. So in terms of some financial decisions, yes, but where it's a kind of, if you're making a choice between two things because you've only got so much money, and that's going to affect things creatively, I want to be part of that decision. But other than that, no, gosh, no.
So can we talk now about ideal environments? I'm going to allow you to play fantasy writer's room, and I'll start with Sophie. what are the things you think need to be in place, both for you as a showrunner, lead writer, executive producer, what's good for you, but also what do you think you need to put in place to make sure the writers have a good time in your room?
I'm actually in this position now, so I really hope that in a few months' time people are able to go like, you know, she lived up to her bullshit rather than God, no. So for me, what I want when I look back at the times that I've been a writer in a writer's room, there are sort of two environments that like I wish I could have had, or like what you're in, you find yourself in one or the other and you wish it was a bit more like the other. That the head writer or the showrunner, the exec producer has given us something to work with rather than nothing, and that we're basically breaking the whole show without creator credit or anything like that. So they haven't given us anything to work with. We're not sort of creating episode 1, we're creating the show and now episode 1. I think that can be fine if everyone knows that that's what they're going into. And I know there are development rooms now, but when you're walking in expecting you're going to break episodes 1 to 6 and you're breaking the show, you know, who are the main characters, it's a bit, that can be destabilizing and a bit alarming. The other one is when the writer comes in with too much, too set in their ways, and you're not entirely sure what your role is, and they're defensive about absolutely everything in their Bible. And we all know, I know that I write a Bible to get the thing sold, and then after that, like, I don't fucking want any of that. Like, that's what you wanted. That's what you wanted to get over the line. Like, you know, this is, now we need to kind of move away from this and develop it further with a room. But I've been in rooms where you just can't change anything, and that's also not right. So I want to sort of come in as the showrunner with enough. I want the groundwork. I want to have shown that, like, here's the way I'm thinking, here's my solution to the mystery, here are the core characters that I think will tell the story really, really well. Here are the questions that I have, here's what we can play with, and here's a potential few beats. So a little bit of groundwork so that we have beginning to the conversation, so we're not all just collectively staring at a blank sheet. And I need that as well, because for me, staring at a blank piece of paper is one of the most crippling things anyway. Doing that with like 5 other people watching me, expecting me to lead, is even worse. So yeah, no, that's kind of what I want. What I also want, and I feel like is in decreasing supply, is time. I feel like I always thought that the further I got in my career, the more time people would give me to do my wonders, and instead it's just crunch, crunch, crunch. We want this before this. We want this before that, and I'm looking around. Am I the only one who thinks you can't do good things in 3 weeks? I don't mean the time of the room, but even like, we want storylines. We've greenlit a show. Can we have storylines in 2 weeks, please? And you just already everything is like this. And yeah, the truncation of time. I don't know if it's a me thing, if people hear how quickly I talk and go, she must work so fast. She doesn't sleep. But she does sleep, and so do the other writers that she wants to employ. And I think if you're really stressed as a head writer, you're going to stress out your writers, they're going to get stressed. And so I think time and groundwork is what I want.
Simon, what sort of an ideal structured day in your room, thinking about time and that idea of it's not infinite, but you always need a little bit more?
I've been really lucky on the 2 projects I've worked on where we had a lot of time, and that's so valuable. And it's crazy that you don't have more time, because that is where you are giving birth to your whole series right at the beginning, and it's the cheapest part of the process. If you make mistakes there, then they become incredibly expensive when you're shooting. So much better to spend a week wrestling with an idea on one of the episodes that doesn't work and throwing it out then, and it's cost you a week's wages of everyone in the room, which is nothing compared to shooting and throwing away an episode, or writing it on the fly the week before and having something very weak. So it's such a false economy to rush. As Sophie's saying, time has got to be both the most precious thing and will get you the best writing, and it's also the cheapest part of the process. So it's a win-win for everybody to add on a couple of weeks at that end of the process. And so that to me is vital. The other thing that I found seemed to be very helpful to writers on the two things was to bring along us, not necessarily a pilot, not necessarily episode 1, but a piece of work that represents the tone and the pace of the series you're working on. It's very hard to discuss tone and pace. If you read it, if you read the characters, then you get, as a writer, you go, okay, I get it. There's a sort of strange, sly humor in this, which is very difficult to sit in a room and discuss. But I felt it helped everyone face in the same direction if they could read 50 pages of one of the scripts. And quite often that script didn't even end up in, or at least a lot of it didn't end up in the show. But what it did was make everyone go, oh, I see what you're trying to do. I see the tone, which for me, the tone is the most tricky thing to get right and discuss. So that's two things that I feel are really important and really helpful for the writers, for everybody in the room.
And Emilia, you've worked on shows that are, without being reductive, are big juggernauts, Law and Order, and The Tunnel. That's burning through a lot of story, a lot of episodes. What was useful in those rooms? What worked well in those much more commercial rooms, I would suggest?
I think Law and Order is a bit different because we were kind of taking American episodes and then essentially, in some cases, kind of adapting those episodes or taking the essence of them. So that's slightly different, I think, to The Tunnel. But in The Tunnel, I sort of went in with sort of a fairly comprehensive idea for the first series, for the series, and then, you know, worked with the writers to create something like completely different, actually. But we sort of took lots of research in, and we kept that sort of essence of that idea. But I was really privileged to have such a brilliant writing team on it, and quite a small team, which I really like. I really like having, I find sort of it's easier to work with kind of 3 or 4 writers than working with a really, really big writers' room. And then everyone feels really invested and they're all going to get their episode. And yeah, I think going in prepared and having a bit of a vision, but being prepared to kind of throw it all up in the air when the brilliant writers you've picked have even better ideas, and being really open to those ideas.
And just to sort of as a follow-up, and I'll come to all you on this, obviously there'll be a lot of people on this Zoom who are hoping to one day be one of those writers in the room. What is your advice for once you get in the room to stay there and get asked back? What do you require from your writers?
Okay, I don't know if this is answering what I require from my writers, but first of all, I think, you know, one of the ways to kind of get into that position of kind of being watched back is just making, well, obviously having great ideas in the room and being really collaborative, but then also making yourself indispensable on a show. And I think that's kind of, with Law and Order, I went in to write 1 episode and just made myself indispensable and made sure that they couldn't, you know, that no one would want to get rid of me, and just kept writing episodes and being as good as I could possibly be, and then creating for myself when obviously Chris left, and then we didn't have a showrunner for about a year, but just creating that role for myself and pushing it. Because I think also, slightly going off the question, but I think it's pretty rare for someone to say to you, and particularly at that time, as a woman, do you want to be a showrunner? They don't. It's like, or even, do you want to be lead writer? You sometimes have to kind of ask for that for yourself. If it's not a show that you've created, where that's kind of a given, you've got a job on another show. At some point, maybe the lead writer or showrunner is going to leave, and you make yourself indispensable and make it so that you're the only person that could have that job, and then maybe that will happen. So that's kind of what I did. And I really like it when I see that in writers, see that ambition in them, and see that they're someone who is just going to really give everything creatively, and really sort of not give everything, like they need to have lives. I don't mean in terms of time, but I mean in the room, just being really generous with their ideas and surprising you. And I think there's, I mean, on The Tunnel, I had 3 writers, and they were all really different and had really different strengths and gave different things in the room. And you'd have some writers that would come up with 10 incredible ideas that day, that just where you literally had to take all of them, and another writer might only come up with one, but they all had just like such value and such different skills and strengths. So I really look for different skills and strengths in people, and just something like some spark of originality that I think I haven't seen somewhere else, and that I think will add to the room.
Simon, how does someone make themselves indispensable in your room?
Gosh, that was such a brilliant answer. I can't really improve on that. I think that's flexibility is really important, and writers who are prepared to really investigate the idea rather than go, oh, we'll sort that out. We'll sort that problem out later. Again, I think you have to sort everything out at the cheap end of the process, at the creative end of the process, before the house is built and you can't fit the sofa through the door because the door's too small. So absolutely everything Emilia said. You want a bunch of co-conspirators who are generous with ideas. Everybody's different in the way they approach things, and some people stay very quiet and listen really hard, and then we'll be able to investigate what everybody said later down the line. Other people come in with loads of ideas, and you have to try and filter that. But that's all good. You want huge amounts of energy. For me, that's really important. Lots of energy and a flexibility and a sort of lack of ego to be able to throw ideas out as they come in and go, no, not that. And it's not personal. It's not that. We've got to head down this way, not that way. It's a good idea, but not for now. So, you need people who can get on with each other and all be prepared to face in the same direction. That for me is really vital, is that you get everyone facing in the direction that you think the show should be going. And that takes a lot of doing, and it's quite a slow alchemy. It took me a long while, and our room a long while, to work out precisely the kind of sardonic tone we were looking for in Trust, or how we would make a totally unsympathetic character, like the old Getty that Donald Sutherland was playing, how we were going to deal with that and make anyone want to watch him for 10 episodes. And those are puzzles, and you need huge amount of energy and an ability to listen to unlock those sort of puzzles, which I couldn't have done on my own. So it's to me, that's such an invaluable process.
Now, Sophie, you are going to feel like I'm picking on you with this question.
Okay.
But how do you know when you're talking too much in a room, and how do you know when you're talking too little in a room?
Sophie, as someone who talks too much, what do you? It's hard to say. I mean, if you can read body language, if you have any sort of emotional intelligence, you can see people's eyes glaze over. But it's amazing. I've been in rooms and people say it's about me. I'm absolutely certain that, like, she takes up too much air, whatever. But I've been in rooms where it's really unbelievable how some people can not realize when to stop. But that's why, like, kind of casting of a room is sort of a really, like, awkward and strange part of it as well. And I always feel quite bad. It's why I get a bit kind of uncomfortable with the idea that, like, writers' rooms are sort of universal and here to stay, and sort of all round every show now, because there are going to be some people who just aren't great people, but are fantastic writers. And I always worry, like, am I missing out on people who are really, really great, but they're really shy and they don't say anything and they don't come up with ideas on the spot? But that's kind of beside the point. I think I always like people who are, I think, similar to Simon, are plugged in and energetic and invested. It can be really hard to keep that momentum up, especially, like, if the show is hit. Like, you know, you want people who can persevere with you, because you're going to get hit with obstacles. Like, the channel or the exec or someone is going to come in and say, or me, or the head writer is going to come in and say, I don't like this. And it can be really tough to, like, to sort of pick yourself up and to keep investing and to keep trying again. But you want people who will go on that journey with you, and who can really interrogate the story with you, and help you kind of answer big and difficult questions. And So it's really hard to know. Like, I don't think there's a kind of, once you've spoken over 30 seconds, like Sophie is doing right now, you know that they need to shut up. Clearly, I am not somebody who you should go to advice as to know when to shut up. Read the room. But if you're somebody who can't really read a room, then I sort of just sympathise. It's a hard one to answer.
My first writers' room experience was the Emmerdale story conference, where there's 20 odd writers plus storyline plus every producer, and so you get really good, a bit like when you're good at ordering from the bar, you get the right angle, you get really good at getting your point across. It's not necessarily the behaviour for a smaller room. I think sometimes you have to, like you say, read the room. If there's only 4 of you in there and you haven't drawn breath for the entire morning, then maybe.
Yeah, and I think you're right that, like, it also does depend on the kind of the mood of the room, the tenure of the room, the size of it. If you've got you and 2 other writers, it can feel very conversational, very fluid, where people can be talking over one another, and that feels fine. You can also be in a much bigger room where there's like 6 or 7 of you, and you have to be a lot more choosy about what you say. I think you start to get the impression that, like, if, you know, don't pitch your idea like 15 times, like it can get really grating. Like, if you can feel a writer in the room just hasn't moved on from the idea, and you're like, do I just have to be rude now? Is that the dynamic you want? Or I've been nice and I've said, no, I think we're going in this way, and you keep pitching it to me, I'm going to just tell you it's crap in a minute. So it's like, it's sort of reading the energy of the, and like choosing your moments, I think, in those bigger rooms, like, is this the idea that I want to go public with? But I think it's also on the showrunner to kind of create a sort of an atmosphere where, you know, where people can feel free to share even what they think is like a bad idea, because it often isn't, or often directs, like, it clarifies something or directs the train of thought in a new direction. But yeah, it's a tricky one. We're not necessarily all people.
One of the things that we've covered in our guidelines, and it came directly from members when we were talking about building these guidelines, is the role of what we've colloquially called cultural consultants in the room. And to explain that, we had a lot of our Black and Asian writers come to us and say they were invited into writers' rooms thinking they were going to be commissioned, and actually what they were invited in to do was download their authentic lived cultural experience as a Black person, as an Asian person. Obviously, the Guild frowns upon that. We think there should be good communication. You should know what your role is in that room. Because it's very important, and obviously something the Guild's working on, that we increase diversity in writers' room. What are your feelings on this? And you know, I'm definitely not putting you on the spot there, but what do you feel about who should be in the room, what the makeup should be, that kind of thing? Simon, I'll come to you first.
I think every writer's room should really just be a microcosm of the rest of the world. They should be people you get on with. They should be full of good ideas. It should be as diverse and as multifarious as you possibly can, because why wouldn't you want every angle covered? This is the moment where you can cover every angle and keep it really wide open and investigate everything at this vital moment. So the most diverse crowd you can find, it's got to be better.
Yeah.
Because you're getting opinions that aren't yours, and that is gold dust for me as the showrunner. I'm no longer sitting in my bedroom on my own, banging my head going, I'm not really sure about this. I've got this team of people going, well, how about this? How about this? In my culture, we'd do this. From where I'm sitting, it might be like this. It's brilliant. Why wouldn't you want that?
Emilia, have you any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Simon's absolutely right. And it's sort of our job really as showrunners or as creators of a show to find as diverse a writing team as we possibly can. And, you know, I think most of us try and do that. The thought of having someone in the room just as a cultural advisor, I mean, I haven't had experience of that, and I would say that was completely wrong. I think you've got to find the diverse writers, and it's our job to kind of nurture diverse writers and find new writers, you know, to fill our rooms as well.
Sophie, do you think that Writers' Room present a good opportunity to bring up new talent and nurture the kind of diversity that we'd all like to see, but we are not at the moment?
Yes, if they're nurturing rooms. Sorry, Sophie. Yes, if they're nurturing rooms, but they're not always.
Sophie?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that's the case. Certainly, I've seen more of that, and reading writers and looking for writers for shows. I've seen more and more writers of different backgrounds whose experience kind of palette is being in writers' rooms, and you're getting good references from them in writers' rooms, and they might not have the most hours of television, but it's a new set of experience levels to look at, and it's, you know, it's because you go higher rung than that, and the writers are sort of the writers that everyone's been going to, and you know, and this is where you have to expand your pool. It's not good enough for networks and for companies and for empowered writers to just say like, well, we checked with the 5 that we've already got swimming around, the 5 women, the 5 like Asian writers, they're not busy, so we've tried, it's fine. It's not good enough to do that now. So like, and so the fact that there's now this new tier kind of coming through who seem to be coming up from my kind of limited experience in like reading newer writers, it is writers' rooms. So hopefully, yes. I would be devastated to find out that like these were writers who were sort of exploited for their own personal background and didn't know that that was supposed to be the case, and aren't paid and aren't offered credit. I also think, and this can be contentious, and I also think it comes down to like what kind of work you're leading. I've been offered stuff that I'm like, why are you offering me this? Because all you can see is, well, I would obviously have to bring on writers who have a closer experience to this, and that would look really weird. Like it would feel icky to me, and like I know that can be really contentious, and so, but at the same time, for me, I'm trying to push back against these like norms of, well, this is a show about sort of white upper middle class kind of people, and therefore really, do we need to diversify? Like you have all these sort of toxic built-in notions into hiring. You're like, yes, like you can, like people, like non-white people are exposed to the narratives of white people like ad nauseum forever. Like they can fucking write you like Charlotte go. Yeah, it's yeah. So yeah, I'm sorry, noise. Yeah, so I'm absolutely kind of all for like we have to create the new rungs. We have to kind of push them up and like give them a ladder up past us to ascend from above us as well, and not just be kind of bringing in people to download their cultural backgrounds. That for me always says like, why was that necessary? Like who is running the show? They possibly shouldn't be running that show. That's what I always end up thinking.
And that will be very much the Guild's opinion on this. I'm going to start looking into the chat for questions. So thank you everybody who's put them in. I will do as many as I possibly can. I won't do the rude ones. One that is coming up and a lot of people are asking for feedback on this is, what's your opinion about neurodiversity and disability in the writers' room? One of the things we've discovered, I mean, Zoom is such a game changer. It's a shame we had to go through a pandemic to discover it, but suddenly the access that we've got in rooms, I know it's not an ideal way of writing, means that our meetings, the Guild meetings, have become more inclusive and more accessible. What's your thought on that for the writers' room? I'll come to Emilia first.
Yeah, I mean, Zoom is just such a game changer, and it would be brilliant to be able to work with more disabled writers who wouldn't have been able to previously, come into some, rooms. So I think we need schemes, and we need kind of support so that there are places we can go to really access as many writers as we can from all diverse backgrounds, and disabled writers, neurodiverse writers, because I'm sort of trying to think if it's ever been clear to me that a script has been, for example, from a disabled writer. I don't think I've ever been sent a script and known that that was from a disabled writer. I mean, I'm not kind of, like, I read scripts pretty blind, really, not necessarily knowing who people are. But if there were, you know, I would really welcome reading scripts and knowing that they're from, you know, maybe from a particular scheme to support neurodiverse and disabled writers. I think that would be great, because Zoom is definitely a game changer.
Yeah, I think the writers' room are currently developing quite a few, the BBC writers and quite a few writers with disabilities and disabled writers. So I think for anybody who has a specific interest in that, it's worth looking at that. Sophie, have you any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I know there have been other writers and other people who've done a huge amount of work on this and campaigning on this, and I absolutely agree with their sentiments that neurodiversity and disability often get left out of the diversity conversation quite sort of blatantly. I think one of my early kind of worries about writers' rooms was how physical writers' rooms was, you know, how kind of location specific they were and accessibility specific they were, and also, like, you know, different but London centric half the time, which feels like a lesser concern than this, but still a thing. And, you know, the amount of meetings I've been to where you've had to walk up 500 steps in a Soho townhouse, or like in the Groucho Club with, you know, steps to get, yeah, and you're just like, this is like, how is this in any way open or like accessible to people who sort of aren't like walking in here unaided, or yeah, it's so I feel like that is sort of left out systemically, literally from the ground up. And I know the BBC Writers' Room have done a scheme on this quite recently. I think we have to start approaching it the way, I mean, you could say that in many ways our TV industry's approach to bettering diversity has been botched at many levels, and we're still fighting to unbotch it. But in the spirit of good faith, we would want to, I think, approach disability and neurodiversity with not in the same way, like in the same hopefully unbotched way of, like, I think you've got to start looking at schemes. You've also got to start embarrassing people into looking, embarrassing the gatekeepers and the powerful people in our industry to go searching for those. I mean, how many times have we as kind of writers off our own backs gone like, you know, I really want to make sure my room is diverse, only to people go, well, no, it needs to be good first and foremost. And I feel like literally up until about a month ago, like 3 or 4 months ago, that was largely the conversation. And then the Black Lives Matter movement really takes hold, like in this incredibly mainstream way during lockdown, and suddenly I'm getting emails from channels, the room must be diverse. They're just scared of being embarrassed, and that works for me. It works, like I've back when it was a problem of being a woman getting like that, that it works for me. So like as long as we are empowered and as long as we can embarrass the powerful people to do the work, to get people in, to make it more accessible and doable for people of all backgrounds and conditions, then all the better. And yeah, Zoom for sure is a game changer, and I'd want to make sure that if I had a writer who couldn't access if we had a physical room, they couldn't access it, that they would be like, they would need to, like, we would give them great Wi-Fi and we would get great Wi-Fi and we would have them on a massive screen, you know, or find a way to, yeah, I think we just have to do the work. I'm rambling.
No, that's fantastic. Simon, one of the questions, this one's from Zena, is showrunners are also managers, and an aspect of a job that isn't always discussed. Do you think it would have helped you to have some sort of training before you took the role? Maybe you did have some training, I'm assuming you didn't. But do you think there should be something in place, maybe through screen skills or something like that, to give us a little bit of a boost about the skills that you need extra to the writing?
It's a tricky question. I don't know. I mean, the guidelines are useful because I went into it completely blind and tried to treat everyone fairly and courteously, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The process is a strange alchemy of trying to get a lot of people to write one thing is tough, and I've failed as much as I've succeeded as a showrunner, but I'm not sure that any training would have helped me, really. So I find the guidelines really useful, but I'm not sure if I would need more than that. I need to get better in myself at casting the writers, really. I've always tried to run things in the most equitable way, but that doesn't necessarily make any difference to the end product at all. So they're very, you know, I think we're all speaking as if we know we're experts, and I'm not. I'm still learning to be a showrunner, and every time, well, I've only just learned that I'm not a showrunner, but every time I'm a lead writer in a room, I'll be learning more. But it's, you know, writing is a tricky business, and getting 5-6 people, all of whom are writers, and we all have our own particular interests, problems. We wouldn't be writers if we didn't. Trying to get something extraordinary out of that, it is really tough. So I don't know, you just have to do your best and do it courteously, and aim to make yourself better and the writers with you better. And I think that's all you can do, albeit with those guidelines, which I think are really useful.
Thank you. Emilia, is there anything you like to magically add to your skill set going forward as a lead writer?
Like Simon said, you know, I learn on the job, and I'm still learning every day. And I think every production and every show, you learn something on that. There's always problems, and problems present chances to learn. So I think I feel like even as a writer, I'm constantly learning. It's never over. It's never like, oh, right, now I'm a writer, it's all fine, you know, or now I'm a showrunner, it's fine. You're just constantly learning. And I think just being open to keeping learning is a really good thing.
Absolutely. Sophie, what about you? If I could wave a magic wand and make you good at something, and you're good at everything, obviously, but
I think I was really lucky in that before I was like writing full time, I was a script editor at CBBC, and I was shipped off to Northumberland and lived in a tiny cottage in the middle of nowhere, and basically went between this cottage and set. And I had never fully worked on a show before, but I was then working like in close quarters with the producer and the script editor and the editors, and like on set, and like solving problems live and editing the scripts and dealing with budget issues that were being fed to us, and you've got to change all that. And that was a huge baptism of fire, and I feel like I'm still taking that, or what I learned there, into what I do now, like every day. And you know, everything's just terrifying at the minute. Like I'm being kind of very, very like sort of offered these sort of like humbling opportunities that you're like, oh my god, this is insane, but at the same time, like the responsibility that comes with that is terrifying. And I have nothing really else to sort of add to that, other than like I just hope that I can kind of come to everything with an open mind and a willingness to learn, and hope that the people who are in charge of me and around me are I've had conversations where I've said, I don't want to come into this pretend like, and I don't want my show to fall over because we're all pretending I know what I'm doing. I would rather just accept what, like, at this point in time, here's what I know how to do, which is right, sort of, maybe. And what I don't know how to do is manage people. And, you know, and like, so how can we make this an effective room where everybody is enabled to be at their best, where we're not all just pretending I've suddenly gone to management school? Like, because I've been in rooms where, like, that's been the case. We all pretend and people become bullies. And I just would really hate for that for that to happen. So yeah, I think there is no sort of formal training. I think the more, if you're an episode writer, see if you can beg, you get in your contract two set visits, take them both and see if the producers will give you more. Just learn what it's like to be on set, and yeah, and then just hope and beg the people you're working with to kind of meet you where you're at and help you get to where you want to be.
I did, before I moved over into drama, I did 4 years in factual production. I was a production coordinator for science and history shows, and I wouldn't miss those 4 years for anything. It gave me a real respect for the process and an understanding of things like call sheets and budgets and stuff like that, which I think I'm still definitely using today. I've got a question here from Kinsey, and I'll come to Simon first with this. Have any of you written a TV script that has been picked up and you didn't want to put it to the room? And is there still room for you to go, look, I know I've run some great rooms, but this is mine and I'm going to write it? Is that still an option for you?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite clear of the question. Could you paraphrase that?
Sorry, that was me doing a very bad paraphrasing of Kinsey's question. When you sit down with a brand new idea, when one pops into your head at 3 o'clock in the morning, do you automatically think, I'm going to take this to a room now, or are there still things you want to write as an authored piece?
Thank you. That's very clear. I now have a tiny little room that I would take everything to, I think. If it's a television idea, writing a series is like writing a novel very quickly. And my experience is in feature films, which, you know, I spent 25 years there. So it's still quite new, this idea of writing and writing and writing endlessly for a long period of time. So I love the idea of the fact that I never thought anyone could help me with writing before. And in a writer's room, people help me. And it's just astonishing. So I'm still in the slight honeymoon period of going, I don't have to be on my own. I can be with other people who appear to be able to read my mind and help me write this. And it becomes an extraordinary collaborative process, which is I think, amazing. When it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And I think we have to be really honest about that, about how difficult it is, because to make it work, people do have to get inside your head, or you have to allow them in for the process to work. So I love the collaboration. I really do.
Emilia, you've worked on authored pieces as well. Is it a grass is greener when you're working on your own? You think, oh my God, I wish I had a room full of people, and when you've got a room full of people, you wish they'd all bugger it off?
That's a difficult one. I mean, I'm doing an authored piece at the moment, so the one that's shooting at the moment is 4 parts, and I've written all of them. For me, it's about the nature of the show and the length of the show as to whether I would write it all myself. Anything that was over 4 episodes, I want a room. I much prefer having a room, really. But it does depend on the nature of the piece. Sometimes I love just being me in my desk and being in my head, but there's nothing as good as those moments when you're with some really great writers collaborating and being inspired. And if you choose the right team, then, you know, it is really inspiring.
Sophie, what about you? Because obviously I believe Blood was just all you. Were you eager to get back to more collaborative work?
So I mean, so I've just done 2 series of Blood, and I'm sort of finishing off a 4-parter for ITV, which is I wrote all those episodes myself, but I would never describe that process as all me. You know, I have such a close, both seasons of Blood and Hollington, the ITV 4-parter, I've developed incredibly closely with my good friend and like exec producer Jonathan Fisher, who is basically like my one-man writer's room. So that process, you know, I value that so highly, and that's me and him sort of traipsing around East Dulwich for 5 hours a day for 3 or 4 days, going, okay, but what's the twist at the end of Act 2? And I have whiteboards all over my wall, like these horrible things that peel off the wallpaper and leave these horrible black marks with, you know, 6 beats per kind of imaginary act, like pre-ad break, and twists and questions. And we sort of work all that out in discussion, and then I go in, write everything. And things change and develop, but yeah, I could never really describe that process for me personally as being on my own. So for me, it becomes a bit scarier when you're like having to bring lots of people in, and rather than me having someone who's helping me, I kind of have to be the person who's helping them, and that's a sort of shift in role, and that's quite daunting. Because you're like, oh, you know, as a writer growing up through the industry, like I've always had somebody who helps me. whether I was doing an episode and I had a great script editor or a producer, or now when I have like a co-exec and a great creative mind. So when you get to the end where you're sort of, now you have to kind of be that person to somebody else, that's like, but I still think I'm going to be looking for people who help me, like who are better at this than I am, who can organize their thoughts better than I can, as you can tell. And yeah, so I do look forward to it, and it is really nice to have balance. I haven't had somebody else write, not for a long time, I had somebody else like write a full script for something that I'm like running or creating before. So that will be, I used to love script editing. I used to love working with writers. So I hope that it will be as sort of nice as that, if I still know how to do it.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think we've got time for one more, and I'm going to go to Christopher's question, which is, are there any tricks to use in the room that can facilitate the energy to get the best out of everyone? Because not that post lunchtime slump, how do you cope with that? I'll come to Emilia first for that.
Gosh, that's really, really hard to answer, because it's always about the alchemy of those particular writers present at that particular moment and what they need. I mean, I think just trying to, I don't know, I think because the rooms that I've run have been quite short, really, comparatively, certainly comparatively to Simon's or to an American model. I think when it's kind of shorter time, it's more intense, and for me personally, I found that kind of like more fun, and people get less bored and less tired. I think if I had weeks and weeks and weeks, then I think we would kind of go off message, and I would start getting bored, and then everyone around me would. But I suppose just trying to keep it inspiring and encouraging people and having really good coffee. That's it really.
Simon, is it all about the coffee in your room?
Well, it's all about the cake for me, I'm afraid. Always provide good cakes and stop at 3. Doesn't matter how early you start. Nothing good has ever happened beyond 3 o'clock for me or any of my writers in any of the rooms I've been in. It's just, I don't know what happens at 3 in the world, but everyone's brain just slumps. So that's the time to bring out the cake and say thank you very much. And an early finish, everyone's happy with an early finish. So.
Absolutely. Sophie?
I agree. I'll finish at 3 and cake. Can I come back for Simon? Yeah, no, yeah, I've been in really long rooms like where they're sort of like full-time jobs, and the relentlessness of that can get really, especially if there's sort of nothing to kind of defeat the slump. It's just like you carry on, and then you go to bed, and then you wake up dreading it, and blah blah blah. I quite like the way, I mean, because it helps me think, and like when I don't have anyone around, I have to like, for the pandemic, I've been staying near my parents, and I'll sometimes just writer's room my mum, and the way I kind of do, by making her kind of help me, and the way I'll do that is by asking like a silly question. Like recently it was like, what's your favourite twist of all time? Your favourite twist can be totally, and we ended up talking about our favourite twists from, and like she's incredibly well read, so she was, oh, there's a ridiculous twist in this Poirot, and we were then like riffing and spitballing, and I was writing down ideas, and I was like, this is what a writer's room is, Mum, this is what we do. And I like a funny question. I like you begin the room with a I feel out of place talking about this because I think they're watching this, but so I'm sorry if this is totally apocryphal, but I always read that in the House of Cards writers room, Girolamo would begin, or at some point would say like, what's not going to happen in the show, what would never happen in the show, and I do apologize that this is totally false, but I always loved the idea that you say, all right, what's a totally stupid idea, what doesn't work, what would never happen in this show, and people fling out ideas that make everyone laugh, get everyone energized and spitballing, and then out of that somehow you get 2 or 3 ideas that actually go like, you know what, that's so fucking weird, that would really work. I love that, and I love those kind of mini games, like side quests. And if after lunch, like that would probably be something that I would want to do, be like, okay, what's your favorite cliffhanger, because then you can just start writing up ideas. And I think it has to feel like play. The whole thing has to feel like playtime, or it feels like work. And none of us got into this because we wanted to work. We got into this because we don't want to work. So as much as we can create, like, you know, you've got to channel that creative energy into something productive by the end of the day, but as much as I can make it feel like play, if I can achieve that, that'd be great.
So 2 things. Bo says yes, that is true, what you just said. Secondly, I would like to say thank you very much to our panelists. For I can't quite believe we've gone over, just gone over the hour. This has been an amazing session. Thank you very much, Emilia. Thank you, Sophie, and thank you, Simon, for giving your time. We'll give you the old silent clap on camera. To anybody listening, the guidelines are up on our website now. They're worth a look, both to empower yourself as a writer, but to be aware of your rights. If anybody whatsoever is having any trouble, not just in writers' rooms, but in writing generally, do feel you can come to us. We have our many craft committees and lots of activists who are ready to talk to you. If you are suffering from any kind of bullying, it doesn't have to be in a writer's room, or harassment, we have an anonymous report it button on the website. Please do come to us. But if you want to talk to someone, you can always email me or anybody else who's involved in the guild, and we will get you the help that you need. So again, thank you to Sophie, Simon and Emilia. Thank you to everybody who came here this evening. I don't know how many of you are going back to writing. I am. I'm on a deadline. They don't know I'm in this room. Thank you very much. And this will be up on the website very, very soon. Thanks a lot.